Hello and welcome to GearHeads. My name's Jesse and today I'm going to be going over a whole bunch of different tips on how to stay organized during major repairs. I just did a video about how to take on big jobs and different rules that I have for making sure that you're successful and that a big job goes smoothly. I hope you guys found that helpful, or if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And now this is going to be like a sequel to that video, because I really do believe staying organized is the biggest thing that I have found has helped me in my career be successful in completing major repair jobs for the first time on all kinds of different vehicles. And then even staying organized, doesn't matter if you've done the job 20 times. If you're staying organized while you're doing it, it's just going to help you speed things up and get faster and faster, and it helps the job go smoother. So let's go ahead and move on to my list. So my number one thing that I always do when I'm trying to stay organized on a big job is, as you take things off of the car and you remove parts, find a spot that will not be disturbed, doesn't have people walking by where they're going to kick and move things. If you're working on a pickup truck, I love to use the truck bed. That's a really convenient spot to lay things out in order and keep them organized. And basically, that's the rule. As you take things off, put them somewhere and either stack them or lay them in a certain order so that you have an order. You know exactly what order those things came off, and when you go to put it all back together, guess what? There's a lot less thinking for you to do up here, and the less time you have to spend thinking about that, the more you can spend thinking about, using your mental energy to think about the actual repair that you're doing. And it helps keep you from getting a little bit overwhelmed. If there's a big job and you've got like 50 parts all laid out and they're all over the place, that can be overwhelming. So number one, just make sure you're taking things off in a certain order, and as you take them off in that order, lay them out in that order and keep them that way, so that when you go to put it back together, you're just reversing that order and putting everything back together nicely, and hopefully a lot faster as well. Number two, use the bag and tag method. I don't see any reason. This is a Ziploc. You don't necessarily have to go buy Ziploc bags. You can if you want to, but I find often enough just from buying different parts from places, there's always bags coming in here and there. Let me actually grab it. I'll show you. I keep a bag of bags. So on the bottom of my tool cart, I have this big bag here. This bag has many small bags inside of it, and I use these things over and over again as I'm working on big jobs, just to label things. Get a Sharpie, have some bags, and as things come off the car, oops, I dropped the Sharpie, but as things come off the car, put them in a bag and write where it came from. This one says exhaust manifold. It's not actually exhaust manifold parts, but that doesn't matter because I know what it goes to. But in any case, that will help you, and it's a very simple method. I know a lot of people like using things like baking trays, or they'll use little cups and this and that. That works, but I just find all it takes is that thing to just get bumped a little bit, and then things move around or fall out and you don't remember what went where. I like to have a bag that can either be zipped up or at least have the top twisted up so that nothing's going to fall out of it. And a bag's kind of easier to organize and tuck away too, versus some tray full of stuff. Number two, I know I just said I prefer bags over trays, but I definitely still use trays. Magnet trays. Magnet trays are fantastic for organizing stuff. Everybody has their own methods. Personally, what I actually like to do, I kind of use my magnet trays to organize my tools. Generally speaking, this is a little disorganized right now and there's not a lot of tools on it, but generally what I like to do with the magnet trays is I will organize my sockets that I'm using and maybe some wrenches and other stuff. I'll organize the stuff that I'm using for that job, and I keep it organized on the tray. So I'll put all my 1/4 inch stuff, on one side in order, my 3/8 on another, on one of the other magnets in order, and I'll do the same thing with 1/2 inch or wrenches if I have, 1/2 inch drive stuff and wrenches going on as well. And then I still also do use magnet trays while removing parts, but I don't usually store and leave them on there. Sometimes I do, but most of the time, especially if it's a really big repair and there's a lot of parts involved, I will use these magnet trays. I'll leave them under the hood or leave them on the body or wherever it is that I'm, on the underside of the frame or something, depending on where I'm doing the repair. As bolts come off, I will put them on the magnet tray, but then once that whole part itself or whatever is removed, I will then move them from the tray, put them in a bag, and tag them. That's just my method, but whatever works for you. The most important thing is to have a method in the first place. That's what's going to help you. My next method I really like to use, and this one really specifically works well for covers. Like if you're doing a timing cover, it can work well for doing a bell housing. It works great for doing valve covers. I love to take pieces of cardboard and I will literally, it only takes a second, get a Sharpie, draw out whatever the shape of the cover is, and then I always put little dots on it where the bolts are going to go for that cover. And then also if you have an X-Acto knife or a razor, it makes it a little easier. Just stab it where those holes are, and then as the bolts come off, just take it and slip it into the cardboard and it'll stay there. And now you know what order and what shape, because I mean, sometimes all of the bolts are the same size, they're all the same length, but a lot of times they're not. And sometimes they've got a stud on them like some of these do. That's why I did it for this one. It'll make it easier when I put it back in. I know exactly which ones that have a stud on top need to go in which position so that the bracket can be added on top later for the, in this case it's for a glow plug module. But you know, I'm doing this for an example for you guys. I think it's a fantastic method and it works really well for me. The next thing I do a lot of is I attach the hardware back to the part if possible. It kind of depends on what part it is, but a lot of times when you're taking things off, you can put the bolts or nuts or whatever back onto a bracket or back onto a piece, and that makes it really hard to lose them, and it makes it super easy to keep track of. Like for example, this glow plug module, here's the bracket, here's the glow plug module. I had to remove the module just to make it a little easier to get the whole thing out, but after I took it off and then after I got the bracket off, I took the nuts that were mounting the glow plug module. I basically just mounted it back onto the bracket, and then I took the nuts that were mounting the bracket to the valve cover, and I also attached them to this bracket with the glow plug control module. Now I know where all my hardware is for this, and I don't have to go searching for it. My next one, and I don't use this one as often, but I do use it occasionally, I'll use zip ties. So I've got this dipstick tube here for a transmission dipstick, and it has one mounting nut that holds it on. And so what I did is I just took a small skinny zip tie, I ran the nut, you know, the zip tie through the middle of the nut and then through the middle of the bracket where it mounts it. And now all I gotta go do is go set this, set this dipstick tube in order the way it came out, and I already have the hardware for it, so when I go to put it back together, all I gotta do is clip this real quick and I've already got the hardware ready to go. And last but not least, I use this method occasionally still, but use your phone or use a camera. Take pictures. Admittedly, I don't actually take pictures like that very often. But occasionally I do, especially if it's a job I'm doing for the first time and you've got some weird routing. Like for example, some cars, like I did a Duramax, I did the fuel, what was it on? It was a very new Duramax actually, and we had to replace the engine on it. And anyways, they've got a very complicated system for their fuel injector, injection lines. They've got lines going everywhere. I just took some pictures of it because then when I went to put it all back together, I could match them up, especially also because I was getting new parts replacing a lot of this stuff. So I was having to swap little brackets and little pieces that held them together and whatnot, and it made it a lot easier when I had pictures to match everything up and put it back together. Like I said, I don't use it all the time, but I know some people find that very helpful, so keep in mind that it's an option and do it if you need to. Alright, so I think that's about all I have for this shorter video. If you guys found it helpful, please let me know down in the comments, and if you have other tips and other ideas for for other people, share them down there. I know there's going to be a lot of people looking through, and more advice is always helpful, and also share your opinions. If you don't like some of the advice I gave for some reason, give me a reason for it. If you appreciated it, I always like to hear that as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, I hope you found it helpful, and as always, keep wrenching!